All right, so let's keep going and talk about Zora Neale Hurston, right? So, if you could, think of one, you know, central or crucial or figurehead for the Harlem Renaissance, right? It might be Zora Neale Hurston. But one kind of interesting or funny thing about her work um, is how she is a uniquely Southern poet, right? Or I should say, writer. She wrote in just about every genre you can imagine, right? So, really, what a lot of her work is. And what we have here in the book, which has been updated since last time I taught this course, the Gilded Six Bits is no longer in here, but we have some other selections which, um, do a really good job of encapsulating, her work. Even though she was so prolific, we have a few selections here in the anthology that I think are very essential pieces of work from her. But what she did, more or less, with a lot of her writing was um, took her experience from living in the deep South, right, like Eatonville, Florida. Um, so she used Eatonville as her main source of inspiration for her work, right? Capturing the life there, right? Um, Eatonville being essentially a black town, right? A black town in Florida. So what Hurston really wanted to do was capture the essence of this town, and she kind of packaged it all up in her writing, in her stories, and took it back up, right? Took it up with her to Harlem and kind of recounted to these other members of the Harlem Renaissance movement, recounted through her writing what this experience was like living in the deep South in America in the early 1900s, right? The early to mid 1900s. So I encourage you, right, to read Sweat, right? That is the first selection in the book. It's a short story, right? So read Sweat, okay? Take 25, 30 minutes to read it. But what I want to spend some time talking about, right? Some of the more bite-sized things. So we have also in here, after Sweat, the Eatonville Anthology, which is kind of like, you could say it is similar to As I Lay Dying in the way that it is one story, basically, but it's divided up into, multiple sections that each feature a unique narrative. All right. So they're not necessarily interconnected. Each section is kind of like its own story within a story, right? But really, the purpose of this, right, is this is Hurston trying to give us these kind of slice of life, right? We can use that term that is more or less a technical literary term, slice of life storytelling, right? So we get these sections here, right? And some of them are just Roman numerals. Some of them are the Roman numeral with a name or some kind of subtitle with it. So let's just get a sense of what Hurston's doing here. So I'll go ahead and read over some of the sections from Eatonville Anthology. These are on 526 in the book if you want to follow along. So these are just some of the shorter bite-sized sections, right? We can call them the slice of life sections. But it's just Hurston trying to capture the essence of life in this town something that would not necessarily be something familiar with all the members of the Harlem Renaissance who maybe were born in New York or born up north, right? So Hurston wants to take the snapshots here of life in Eatonville, Florida, and give them, right, as stories. And they ended up becoming a very, very essential piece of literature that came out of the Harlem Renaissance, right? Even though this stuff does not take place in Harlem or up north necessarily. Okay, so let's look at a few of these. So here's section 2 from the Eatonville Anthology, Turpentine Love, which is just I love that title. It's just great. All right. So let's just take a look at what this says. Jim Merchant is always in good humor, even with his wife. He says he fell in love with her at first sight. That was some years ago. She had all her teeth pulled out, but they still got along splendidly. He says the first time he called on her, he found out that she was subject to fits. This didn't cool his love, however. She had several in his presence. One Sunday, while he was there, she had one, and her mother tried to give her a dose of turpentine to stop it. Accidentally, she spilled it in her eye, and it cured her. She never had another fit, so they got married and have kept each other in good humor ever since, right? So, right, important to keep in mind, all of these stories, right, since Eatonville was an African-American town, right, these are all stories of the Black experience, specifically in Florida, in deep South America, right? And that's important because before this time, and especially before the Harlem Renaissance, you wouldn't exactly get literature focused on people of color, right? It just didn't really happen. But the Harlem Renaissance, the goal, change all that, right? We're going to change that. These people, their stories are now going to be heard, they're going to be read, they're going to be passed around, right? And it's going to be important. It's going to be very important, okay? So let's keep going with another section. This is section 3. No subtitle here, just, Roman numeral 3. Becky Moore has 11 children of assorted colors and sizes. She has never been married, but that is not her fault. She has never stopped any of the fathers of her children from proposing. So if she has no father for her children, it's not her fault. The men roundabout are entirely to blame. The other mothers of the town are afraid that it is catching. They won't let their children play with hers. Okay. Also, I apologize. I am dog sitting for my parents right now, and if you hear the dogs barking, just ignore it. Okay. So here's 4. Tippy. Syke Jones' family all shoot craps. The most interesting member of the family, also fond of bones. But another kind is Tippy, the Joneses' dog. He is so thin that it amazes one that he lives at all. He sneaks into village kitchens if the housewives are careless about the doors and steals meats, off the stove. He also sucks eggs. For these offenses, he has been sentenced to death dozens of times, and the sentences executed upon him, only they didn't work. He has been fed bluestones, strychnine, Nox vomica, and an entire Purana bottle beaten up. It didn't fatten him, but it didn't kill him. So Eatonville has resigned itself to the plague of Tippy. reflecting that it has erred in certain matters and is being chastened. In spite of all the attempts on his life, Tippy is still willing to be friendly with anyone who will let him. Okay. So let's look at a couple more from the Eatonville anthology, a few of the quick ones, okay? So let's look at 8, which is on 528. Sewell is a man who lives all to himself. He moves a great deal, so often that Liege Mosley says his chickens are so used to moving that every time he comes out to his backyards, the chickens lie down and cross their legs, ready to be tied up again. He is bald-headed, but he says he doesn't mind that because he wants as little as possible between him and God. All right, and then let's look at 10. Miss McDuffie goes to church every Sunday and always shouts and tells her determination. Her husband always sits in the back row and beats her as soon as they get home. He says there's no sense in her shouting, as big of a devil as she is. She does it just to slur him. Elijah Mosley asked her why she didn't stop shouting, seeing as she always got a beating about it. She says she can't squelch the spirit. Then Elijah asked Mr. Duffy to stop beating her, seeing that she was going to shout anyway. He answered that she did it just for spite, and that his fist was just as hard as her head. He could last just as long as she. So the village let the matter rest. Okay. So I do recommend, right, familiarize yourself with Sweat. Familiarize yourself with the other entries of the Eatonville anthology, okay? But also with Hurston, it's very, very important that we talk about her essay, which is included here. It starts on 533. This is one of the most important things to come out of the Harlem Renaissance, okay? How it feels to be colored me, right? It's her personal essay, right? And I can't really overstate it. It is one of the most important works to come out of this literary movement, right? It's very important. Okay. For reasons that should be obvious, I shouldn't have to go into too much detail, but it all boils down to this is the first time, right? This is a big series of firsts for American literature, right? For a woman of color to write so boldly, so proudly, right, about who she is and the acceptance of that, right? It's very powerful. It's very important. And, you've heard me say this a lot this semester. There's a reason why the stuff that's anthologized in here is anthologized in here, right? It's very important, okay? So we'll just look at a little bit from How It Feels to Be Colored Me, right? I'll read a few excerpts just so we can get a taste for it, right? We can understand what Hurston is getting at here with this essay. All right, so it begins. I am colored, but I offered nothing in the way of extenuating circumstances, except the fact that I am the only Negro in the United States whose grandfather on the mother's side was not an Indian chief. This next line right here, very important and pretty famous line in American literature, and it's important to note that it comes from not a short story or a poem or a novel, but an essay, right? A personal essay. I remember the very day that I became colored. Up to my 13th year, I lived in the little Negro town of Eatonville, Florida. It is exclusively a colored town. The only white people I knew passed through the town going to or coming from Orlando, right? So let's look at a couple of other excerpts here. So let's look at the paragraph on the bottom of 534. Right? She says, "But I am not tragically colored. There is no great sorrow dammed up in my soul, nor lurking behind my eyes. I do not mind at all. I do not belong to the sobbing school of negrohood who hold that nature somehow has given them the low-down dirty deal, and whose feelings are all hurt about it. Even in the helter-skelter skirmish that is my life, I have seen that the world is to the strong, regardless of a little pigmentation more or less. No, I do not weep at the world. I am too busy sharpening my oyster knife." It goes on, "Someone is always at my elbow reminding me that I am the granddaughter of slaves. It fails to register depression with me. Slavery is 60 years in the past. The operation was successful and the patient is doing well, thank you." Right? She uses this analogy of that time in American history as an operation, right? To recover from the tragic wounds. She says the operation was successful and the patient is doing well, right? The patient being the African Americans, right? "The terrible struggle that made me an American out of a potential slave said, 'On the line.' The Reconstruction said, 'Get set,' and the generation before said, 'Go.' I'm off to a flying start, and I must not halt in the stretch to look behind and weep." This is a very important line, right? This next sentence here. "Slavery is the price I paid for civilization, and the choice was not with me. It is a bully adventure and worth all that I have paid through my ancestors for it. No one on earth ever had a greater chance for glory." Right? So skip down a little bit. "I do not always feel colored. Even now I often achieve the unconscious Zora of Eatonville before the Hegra. I feel most colored when I am thrown against a sharp white background." Right? The bottom of 535, "At certain times I have no race. I am me. When I set my hat at a certain angle," right? Another really awesome line from this essay. I love this. "When I set my hat at a certain angle and saunter down 7th Avenue, Harlem City, feeling as snooty as lions in front of 42nd Street Library, for instance. So far as my feelings are concerned, Peggy Hopkins Joyce and Buell Mitch, with her with her gorgeous remnant stately carriage, knees knocking together in a most aristocratic manner, have nothing on me," right? She's got that swagger. "The cosmic Zora emerges. I belong to no race nor time. I am the eternal feminine with its string of beads. I have no separate feeling about being an American citizen and colored. I am merely a fragment of the great soul that surges within the boundaries, my country, right or wrong. Sometimes I feel discriminated against, but it does not make me angry. It merely astonishes me. How can any deny themselves the pleasure of my company? It's beyond me." Right? So yes, Zora Neale Hurston is awesome, and right. So our takeaways from her work are not only just her telling the stories of the disenfranchised African Americans in the Deep South, right? She wanted those stories to be heard. She wanted to just capture as many of those little universes as she could, so their experience, their lives could, carry on, and we would know about it, right? Eatonville anthologies and Sweat. And then How It Feels to Be Colored Me is just one of the most awesome personal essays probably ever. It's just incredible. And so yeah, that's why Zora Neale Hurston is, the figurehead that she is for the Harlem Renaissance movement. And, that is just a very small taste of everything that she brought to the table. But again, with a lot of the stuff we cover, this is, a survey class. So we can only kind of scratch the surface on some of the stuff, and then we have to move on to the next thing to make sure we cover all the content we need to. So yeah, that is it for the video lectures. So after I upload this, I will upload exam 2. So exam 2, just make sure, right, we'll have the weekend to do it. I'll say let's cut off at 11:59 on Monday night, okay? So I will open a Dropbox after I post the exam, and I want this to be done the same way as before, right? We'll pick 3 out of the 4 questions to respond to. Please only use, I know it's take-home exam, but please only use your book and your notes, okay? I can pretty easily tell when you use a study guide website for your answer. So please don't do that. Please don't make me have to, talk to you about that after I grade your exam. So if you have any questions as you're taking the exam, please email me. I will try my best to get back to you. It'll be the weekend, so I might not be available to respond immediately, but I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. And other than that, good luck on the exam and have a great weekend. I will see you back on Tuesday.